The Social Dilemma is a documentary on Netflix where a bunch of former tech employees and executives who worked for the likes of Google, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest. Wait, Pinterest? Huh. They all got together, sat on a stool, and then told us, yo, that stuff we used to work on, it's killing society and it's messing with your brain, man. I made millions contributing to that, but now I've suddenly grown a conscience. They cite things like the impacts on mental health, addiction, spread of fake news, political echo chambers. These are all issues with social media, and I've talked about these a fair bit on my channel. However, with this documentary, I think for the average viewer, the only reasonable takeaway from it is, well, it's all messed up. We gotta start throwing our phones away or we're screwed. I feel like it placed an unfair or disproportionate level of burden on a few social media platforms for a lot of our social ills. It was pretty ridiculous and kind of silly at times.
What are you most worried about? I think in the shortest time horizon, civil war.
What the fuck?
If we go down the current status quo for, let's say, another 20 years, we probably destroy our civilization through willful ignorance. We probably fail to meet the challenge of climate change.
Climate change ignorance has been a really horrible thing well before social media took over our lives. All of society's problems don't hinge on these platforms. I did not like this doomer attitude. This whole, oh, we can never come back from this, Pandora's box is now open. We've never seen anything like it before. This has been said about literally every major technological advancement in our history. About how they're going to destroy society and corrupt our minds. In the past, this kind of rhetoric has been spouted about television, about all kinds of different forms of music, hell, even literally about the printing press. And they specifically mentioned people not being afraid of the bicycles when it was first invented. That's wrong. The bicycle faced a lot of irrational opposition and fear-mongering. This documentary never mentions the positives with social media. They didn't acknowledge the other side at all. I mean, we just have to look at this COVID situation and how social media gives us a space where we can still interact safely with each other, right? Not to mention about how it gives a voice to people who otherwise would not have had one. Think about some of the recent progressive movements that owed a lot of their traction to social media. Things like Me Too, things like BLM. But leaving aside that, they also literally never acknowledge the other side. We never hear from current executives or employees of Facebook and the like. What they think, how they aim to address these issues. If you're making a documentary like this, it'd be nice to hear from the people who are currently in charge or working for these companies, right? People forget this, but a lot has changed over the last couple of years. Just a couple of years ago, YouTube was horrible. Just how much fake and just straight up white nationalist shit you would get on your recommended. That has improved a ton. I would like to hear what these companies aim to do going forward, how they aim to improve further. Hold them accountable for sure, but give them a voice. Even if you want to take a certain stance with your documentary and go on to refute the claims of these employees of the tech companies, that's fine, but at least give them that representation so they can have some say. I think that's important in all this, right? So that the average viewer can get a more rounded understanding instead of a very skewed view of what is a complicated topic. One that is absolutely not super cut and dry. Of course, I'm the last person to deny that there are issues with alienation, radicalization, fake news, yada yada. No, I literally said this in a recent video. Social media in general is getting so messed up. The modern phone is probably skull fucking a lot of you guys. However, I simply view social media as a tool that can have an exacerbating force on already existing issues. So if we had a completely perfect functional society, I'm talking like an absolute utopia, and you plop social media into that, I don't think that society suddenly goes to shit. For example, issues with undermining democracy, yeah, for sure it contributes, but the fundamental things are much larger issues, like people feeling disenfranchised, people feeling like their institutions are failing them, or economic strife or low social mobility. Not to mention issues with education, where people aren't taught how to engage with this kind of information and news critically. There's no guarantee that without social media we wouldn't be facing a lot of the social ills we currently face. Right? For example, they harp on a lot and they really bemoan all the issues with algorithmic targeting and echo chambers. And as one of their examples, they mention misinformation on WhatsApp leading to violence in India. But WhatsApp doesn't algorithmically serve you information, right? It's an encrypted messaging service. They also didn't mention that a lot of the most extreme radicalization actually happens or stems from outside of these major companies and platforms. For example, 4chan and 8chan, relatively small message boards. Again, which doesn't use any sort of algorithmic targeting. This is not just an issue with social media and algorithms.
Which is very much the impression that this documentary gives you. Like, oh, these guys are manipulative and you're fucked. And everything wrong today can be stemmed to that. But it's like with any issue, in the past, I could also have blamed the media of those times. Propaganda, misinformation, these are not new things. Yes, of course, they can now be scaled at a level previously unmatched. And it's unmatched in how it's able to find people that are inclined to think a certain way and then feed them the information that they want to hear. I recognize this. I'm not saying that social media, it just reflects everything that's wrong in society, that it doesn't contribute at all. It just feels like the proportion of blame here is a little silly.
The biggest spreaders of fake news are older people. People who are less savvy. Because in the past, there were gates and barriers to being a source and a spreader of news, at least at a wide scale, whereas now almost anyone can be, right? I think people my age and those of a younger generation generally kind of understand that and are a little bit more critical with their use. I do think that as a society, we can start to more firmly understand what these structures are, what purpose they serve. And the documentary did do a pretty decent job of depicting that. Like, oh, they're trying to pump as many ads down you as they can. Once people get more cognizant of that, once people get a little bit more literate, once they start to understand that Instagram wants you to keep looking at the screen and keep scrolling, and to look at all the products on their page, that there will be a mindset shift. I think a fair amount of people my age who grew up just before social media were a thing and then saw it become an increasingly large part of their lives have grown kind of disillusioned with the likes of Facebook. And there could genuinely be in time a natural correction for some of these bad trends. We're in a teething stage. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna be rough.
The documentary spends very little time talking about actual solutions. They had a few tacked on at the end, with the biggest one seemingly that these tech companies should just make more humane products with a different foundational model. They focused a lot on the idea that these algorithms are designed to keep you as engaged as possible. And that comes with some externalities, related to all those previously mentioned issues. But essentially what they're saying here is that we enjoy these things too much, that these products are too good.
Like, should these companies, through the goodness of their hearts, make worse products that we're less inclined to engage with? That they will make less money on selling ads? Like, of course not. They're never going to do that, right? What can be done? What should be done? All you're left with as a viewer after watching that is, yeah, screw Facebook, man.
And look, the level of power and influence these platforms have is insane. But that doesn't mean everything about every single one of these social media companies is rotten to the core and it all has to be done away with. Algorithmic targeting can also be a really good thing. Through stuff like YouTube's recommended feed, I've been exposed to comedy, art, personalities that I otherwise may not have found. Just the whole algorithm bad is such a simplistic way of looking at it.
This goes back to an idea I've harped on quite a lot on this channel, and that is being able to extract value and positives from something and leaving the rest. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
If we have an issue with misinformation and with extreme political radicalization, we can target those things without having to completely throw away everything about the current model. Okay, here's the truth that no one really wants to hear, alright? I doubt there's going to be significant legislation that changes the current algorithm targeting and advertiser models anytime soon. And if we do get that, that could be a great band-aid. But there's still going to be a gaping wound behind that. See, the thing that no one really wants to admit to themselves, the most effective true solution to this dilemma, like a real solution, something to really make a dent long term, and it has always been the case before social media made it clearer than ever, the real solution is recognizing, acknowledging, and working on our own biases from the ground up. And beyond that, treating things like addiction and insecurities with compassion. There has to be like a grassroots proper movement to prioritize these things. If you look at a post of yours on Facebook or Reddit or whatever, and it's not getting the amount of likes you want, and that makes you feel bad, that's not Zuckerberg making you feel bad. There have always been things in the media and elsewhere that exploit our biases, our fears, and our insecurities. Hell, this docudrama is kinda one of those things. Social media has been really good at pulling back the curtain and exposing our flawed human minds. It's up to us to start there. I mean, I don't know how viable that is. It'll probably be a long grinding process that'll have to be constantly iterated on, but I think fundamentally that's the truth. Alright, my final thoughts on the documentary.
The one thing it did quite well was, explain how these social media companies operate, which for people who weren't aware, that can be a really good thing. Not mentioning the positives really bothered me. I'm sorry, I refuse to believe that being able to instantly access all of my acquaintances and all of the information in the world in the palm of my hand is an unequivocally bad thing. But yeah, those are my thoughts. This felt very oversimplified, very sensationalized. It felt like to me they took really complicated problems and placed them squarely on the shoulders of a few social media platforms. And it really annoyed me that they didn't acknowledge the other side of things a lot. Anyway, I'm done. Check out my other videos, like, subscribe, blah, 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 bye.